How does the fiber we eat in foods impact our appetites and our resting metabolic rate? The amount of calories burned just by existing. What happens when we eat fiber filled foods like beans? Researchers in Sweden gave people beans for supper, and by the next morning, after their friendly flora had a chance to eat them too, their satiety hormones like PYY were up, their hunger hormone ghrelin was down, and they reported feeling less hungry. The researchers didn't measure subsequent food intake, but a similar study with whole grain rye for supper did, and found a decrease in food intake at lunch the next day. Those who had eaten the fiber rich food the night before felt fully satiated with about 100 fewer calories at a meal more than 12 hours later. So, by eating fiber rich foods, you're setting yourself up for success. Reduced caloric intake at a single meal or even over a whole day doesn't necessarily translate into long term weight loss, though, as our body may find ways of compensating. Experimentally delivering short chain fatty acids directly to the colon every day for months does reduce abdominal fat, liver fat, and overall weight gain. But what about getting them the old fashioned way, eating fiber through our mouth? A 2022 systematic review and meta analysis compilation of more than 24 randomized controlled trials of various straight fiber supplements versus placebo found that those study participants in the groups taking the actual fiber lost an average of about 2.5 pounds more than those in the control groups. These were studies only averaging 17 weeks long, though there have been fiber supplementation trials that have lasted up to a year, and they showed significantly more weight loss. The fiber supplement findings were inconsistent, however, presumably because dozens of different fiber types were tested. How much money can you make selling beans? So there are all sorts of fancy new fibers on the market with names like IQPG002AS. The IQP stands for InQpharm, the drug company that came up with it. Ironically, it was found to be quite effective, according, of course, to the employees of said drug company who published the study. Using isolated fiber extracted from plants or made in a lab can be helpful in experimentally proving fiber's effectiveness, apart from all the other healthy components in whole foods. But if anything, one might expect even greater benefits from eating fiber the way nature intended, in intact plant foods. It turns out that telling people to increase their intake of fiber rich foods may actually be one of the most effective single pieces of advice for weight loss. Published in the prestigious Annals of Internal Medicine, a study entitled Single Component versus Multi-Component Dietary Goals randomly assigned hundreds of people into one of two weight loss regimens. One simply encouraged people to get at least 30 grams of fiber each day, which is about the recommended minimum adequate intake. The other group was advised to follow a far more complex weight loss program recommended by the American Heart Association. In addition to also being advised to hit the 30 daily grams of fiber target, study participants were prescribed carefully calculated calorie intake goals, told to switch from red meat to white, cut down on sugary beverages, reduce sugar and sodium intake across the board, and moderate their alcohol consumption. Even though both groups were told to reach the same fiber target, the group whose sole focus was fiber intake ended up eating more than twice as much extra fiber as the multi-component intervention, and surprisingly, similarly improved the quality of their diets. So the fiber-only group ended up reducing their saturated fat intake as much as the group who was explicitly instructed to do so. Just telling people to eat more whole plant foods seems by default to naturally crowd out some of the less healthy options that may have ended up on their plates. With similar dietary improvements, both groups lost similar amounts of weight, suggesting if you were able to give only one piece of weight loss advice, eating more fiber might not be a bad choice. Of course, it only works if you actually do it. One low-carb study reported favorable results compared to a high-fiber diet. How high was this so-called high-fiber diet? The study participants started out at a terribly low 17.4 grams a day. Unfortunately, that's pretty typical for the United States. That's only about half the average recommended minimum daily intake of 31.5 grams. The human body was designed to consume more than 100 grams of fiber a day. The participants started out at 17.4 grams and on their high-fiber diet shot up to 19.7 grams. That is in no way a high-fiber diet. Yet, the researchers used their findings to conclude, We believe previous claims of the benefits of fiber for weight loss may have been overstated. Less than 3% of Americans reach even the recommended minimum daily adequate intake of fiber. There's so much fuss about protein, but for that, the stats are reversed. More than 97% of Americans do get enough protein, and more than 97% of Americans do not get enough fiber. Almost everyone is eating fiber deficient diets, and that's just based on the piddly US dietary recommendations of 14 grams per 1,000 calories, which comes out to be about 25 grams a day for women and 38 grams a day for men.